Below Deck, a Titanic story, written by Tony Bradman, illustrated by Kevin Hopgood. Chapter 5. Catherine screamed. Grace knew she would have to take charge, even though she felt terrified herself. The two girls stumbled in the dark as they dragged Catherine along the hallway. After a while, they came to an area where the lights were still flickering, but now the floor started to shake and the hallway seemed to tip even more sharply. Grace felt like she was in a nightmare as they turned down hallway after hallway, but at last they came to a staircase that Grace recognized. It would take them to the main deck. They climbed upward, only to discover that things had gotten much worse. The Titanic was creaking and groaning like a giant beast in agony, and its front part was now completely underwater. Most of the lifeboats had been launched, but there still seemed to be as many passengers on board the Titanic as ever. Grace saw quite a few people struggling into life preservers and jumping into the icy sea far below. "Come on this way," said Grace, and she pulled Catherine towards a lifeboat that hadn't been launched yet. Suddenly a voice called out, "Catherine! Oh, thank goodness we found you!" It was Catherine's mother pushing through the crowd. She grabbed her daughter and held her tight. Catherine's father appeared from the crowd. "We must hurry," he said. "They won't be able to launch the lifeboat if they have to wait any longer." The three of them started moving towards the ship's rail, Catherine's father roughly pushing people out of their way. Grace followed and found herself at last looking down into a lifeboat. It was almost full, but there were still a few free places. A couple of the crew helped Catherine and her parents into the boat through a gate in the rail. Just as Grace was about to climb down into the lifeboat herself, one of the crewmen put his arm out to stop her. "Hold it," he said, looking Grace up and down. "Only first-class passengers are allowed in this lifeboat." "Shame on you!" a man yelled behind Grace. Others angrily called out too. Grace stood shivering in the cold night air, jostled by the crowd, her eyes filling with tears once more. "But she saved me," Catherine said quietly to her father. Catherine's father stood up. "Let her on," he said to the crewman. "She's with us." The man nodded and helped Grace down into the lifeboat. She sat on a bench next to Catherine, who squeezed her hand. "I couldn't let them leave you behind," said Catherine. "I'd still be lost if it hadn't been for you." Grace looked up at Catherine's parents, who were watching them. "Thank you," Catherine's mother whispered to her through an exhausted smile. Just then the lifeboat was lowered, and they splashed down into the sea. The crewmen at the oars rowed them away from the sinking ship. Grace turned around and saw that the Titanic was sliding underneath the water in a huge cloud of steam. Catherine's father leaned over. "Don't worry, Grace," he said, with a kind expression on his face. "We'll take care of you." And the lifeboat bobbed gently on the waves. Grace wondered what would happen next. She was only halfway to America, but at least she felt safe for now, sitting between Catherine and her parents.